Good morning or afternoon. I guess mostly for everybody it's afternoon. We'll get started momentarily. Just letting everybody come in. There we go. Welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'm Leslie Levy-August, Chief Marketing Officer at KYG Trade, and welcome to Trust But Verify Guardrails for AI and Trade Compliance. We're going to dig deep into the guardrails for AI topic today, and we really appreciate you taking the time. This should be a very practical and lively discussion, I think. Before we jump in, though, we have a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, and everybody will get the recording who was registered for the webinar. We do have the chat feature active, so feel free to say hi, share your name, where you're joining from, and comments as we go along if you'd like to, and our team will keep an eye on the chat throughout the webinar. For questions, we'd prefer if you drop them into the Q&A panel so we don't miss them, and you have the option to upvote and comment on questions as well. We're going to take those along the way at a logical break time, but we'll also save time for Q&A at the end. And if we don't get to your question live, we'll follow up after the webinar. You're going to see a couple of quick polls. There'll be anonymous polls that'll pop out throughout the session. And if you can, we'd appreciate your participation. And it helps us tailor the conversation to what's most useful for you. With that, let me quickly introduce our speakers. First, we have Todd Smith, who's the CEO and founder of KYG Trade. Todd has spent his career at the intersection of global trade compliance, technology, and enterprise risk. And before KYG, he was a partner at two of the big four, KPMG and EY, in the trade and customs practices. He founded KYG Trade about 4 years ago to bring cutting-edge technology and automation into global trade compliance. Todd's going to kick us off with the big picture framing and the practical guardrails. And we'll also be joined by Anand Raghavendran, our Chief Technology and Product Officer. He's led the design and implementation of a number of trade compliance technology systems. Previously, he was Chief Product Officer at ClearNow and CEO of GT Connect, a global trade management platform. Anand will connect the dots on what all this means operationally and interject periodically throughout the Guardrails webinar. You'll hear from both of them throughout, and we'll keep it moving and interactive. We'll pause for questions along the way, and then do a final Q&A at the end. With that, Todd, over to you to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie, and welcome everybody. As Leslie mentioned, we're going to talk about the application of AI in trade compliance. We're going to get into, some pretty, deep guardrail discussion, as well as, an enterprise AI adoption checklist, which, you can get from the deck after the webinar as well. I always like to kind of start off these webinars with just trying to, take a pulse and see how everybody's, feeling or still feeling, since Liberation Day. And, point out that, it should be obvious to you that, it's causing both chaos and opportunities, for all of you. On the opportunity side, at least I hope, budgets are opening up like never before, and money really is being thrown to solve, manage, and fix tariff and global trade compliance management. But as you can see in this chart on the right, the chaos that's being created really has been coming in the form of the trade remedy codes, the Chapter 99 codes, which are both penalties and exemptions, and then of course there's the unstacking. And as you can see in the chart, we've never had, to manage the number of different Chapter 99 codes and line splits, and it's just really creating a lot of chaos on top of the added cost. And we are all being inundated. We're being inundated with demos and discovery calls from trade compliance professionals, like most of you on the call, interested in our tech because you need help. And staying on top of these changes, answering questions to your CEOs and your boards, have and how the impact of tariffs are going to impact your operations and margins. It's all over the news. Doesn't matter what channel you watch, it's everywhere. And yet we're also hearing that you need to present a business case on why you need software to help. Like just turn on the news and there's your business case, right? All I can say is like I show here is like really like if the news isn't enough, maybe this slide with these penalties, which are again historic. We've never seen penalties stack up like this in 1 year. In my career, this is really a new landscape that we're operating in. And if this doesn't do it itself, you can also point to the net revenue recovered from entry summary reviews. If you look at the difference between 2024 and 2025, and these are fiscal years, so 2026 started October 1st, and within this slide was actually produced in CBP's first quarter. The numbers are just really really staggering, and that includes the duty, taxes, and fees collected, the penalties, the liquidated damages. It really is a whole new ballgame from the pre-Liberation Day state of things. So, with that sort of as a backdrop, again, the application of AI in trade compliance today is really what we're going to be focused on. And I guess there 2 years ago even there was still a lot of questions about how accurate, how reliable is AI. And from my standpoint, I do believe that the capability really has been confirmed if implemented right. As you can see here, we had our AI assistant is Kay, take the broker's exam from October, just the last broker's exam, and Kay scored a 93%, got 100% on the tariff classification, and it only took like 5 to 7 minutes for that to happen. And I just want to put out there in case anybody is wondering, no, we did not feed Kay the answers to the October exam. And so it does suggest, and what we're hearing from our clients is that it works. But there still needs to be thought given to how you constrain and really put guardrails around AI. Not all AI is the same. And what are the best practices for doing that, whether you're using our system or someone else's system. And you know, we can look at an analogy, into other highly regulated fields like the medical field and their use of AI. This is from the John Hopkins research paper. Um, and if you read the quote, it says, under the current medical liability system, if physicians take the step to consult an AI tool in a case of high uncertainty, then decide to deviate from what the AI recommended, they're exposed to legal risk in the event that something were to go wrong with the patient, right? So this is what's happening in another highly regulated field. And so you have to ask ourselves, if you're not using AI, are you exercising reasonable care? So that is the question. Now, of course, for some of you who may have heard, there was a recent ruling which kind of turns on its face, the use of AI. So in this ruling, HQ 350722, which was made public in March, we had some pretty interesting findings, and there's been a tremendous amount of chatter on LinkedIn and elsewhere. We've already had two webinars on this ruling, but yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like you're getting constrained in terms of how much AI you can actually use and whose AI you can rely on. We had a guest speaker on our last webinar, Richard Wortman, who's a partner at Grunfeld. And, you know, I guess at a high level, online platforms are okay to use if they're not also assisting with the preparation and filing of an entry. So that's one thing. And then in terms of recommendations, sort of that sort of safe zone, if if it's not an AI classification standalone tool, um, it's still okay to use AI, for reasonable care and compliance, provided the AI platform and who's using it and who made it is based in the U.S. That the algorithms, the logic, and the programming were designed by a licensed customs broker. This is all backed up by the ruling, and that the company that has produced the software has at least one corporate officer that is a licensed customs broker, so that they are able to obtain a permit. So those are sort of the parameters for using AI to conduct or exercise reasonable care, and sort of stay in that safe harbor. So before going on to the next slide, where we're going to get into the enterprise AI adoption considerations, Anand, are there any questions that have come up that we want to address?
So I don't see any questions yet, Todd, but I'm going to reflect on something. I just was looking at the results of the poll that we just published.
Yeah.
42% of people think AI is a waste of time and it's going to go away. And another close to 30% of people said, I don't understand this. So we see that about 71% of respondents to this webinar somehow think AI is not relevant, or like they are not in the AI bandwagon yet. Do we want to level set a little bit? Maybe you reflect a little bit on that and just talk about why AI is definitely there, or a different perspective to that.
Well, yeah. I mean, all I can tell you is that we have customers with some very large enterprises that are successfully using our platform, that has native AI capabilities built into it that are geared very specifically to help them in their job. So they're not using general purpose LLMs, which I don't think are I would probably, if that's all I was considering in terms of responding to the question, are the publicly available LLMs, I would agree. Those publicly available LLMs are not going to get there, for trade compliance professionals. But a platform, and there are several companies that are now, AI, and that are specific to help trade compliance professionals. It works. And if it's done right, it's going to help you do your job faster. It's not going to take your job. It's just going to help you do your job faster, and it'll allow you to get more work done. That's what we're seeing from our clients, not just for tariff classification, but for free trade agreements, forced labor, export classification, even first sale, post-entry reviews, audits. Yeah, our clients are getting very good results, and we're hearing very good things. So for all of you that are naysayers, you really need to check us out and check out some of the other companies that really are focused on, trade AI specifically.
And if I may add a little bit more context to that, right? The government is generally the last in the adoption curve, but CBP is already embraced many AI tools, and CBP is actively using AI in a lot of work that they do. So that should tell you that the government believes in AI and the government is ready to adopt AI, and AI is here to stay.
Yeah. So, but there are problems with AI, and a lot of the problems that we're talking about here are the types of problems that maybe those of you who said doesn't work are experiencing on, again, these publicly available LLMs. And that is AI is unlike string search, it's a semantic based search, and the generative outcome, the output, I'm sorry, is also based on semantics and probabilities. So the LLMs produce plausible answers that you read, but they're not necessarily precise. All right. And it uses a vector search result, which is looking for similar sounding content that again may not be necessarily the exact correct regulatory output that we need as trade compliance professionals. And then, the other thing that it lacks, again, these LLMs, these general purpose LLMs, is a lack of traceability. Like, how did it come up with that response? Yeah, there might be some sources, but was there any reasoning or logic, besides just, putting a source there? Um, the 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 way the generative AI works is really based on a probabilistic inference in the output. And what that means is that the AI is not producing a single fixed deterministic answer, but instead it's sort of reasoning using probabilities to decide what the most likely, output should be. Um, so when AI generates output, it's considering actually many possible things, words, labels, predictions. It's not precise. And what it's doing is it's considering, all of these possible next steps, and it's assigning a probability, to each of those next steps. So it's really inferring which option is the best. And so this is what we call an inference that is probabilistic. It's because it's using statistics to figure out what it thinks is going to be the right outcome or the right next word. To give you an example, if you say the sky is and you stop, um, you can think about different probabilities of what's coming next. You're thinking blue or cloudy or falling or green. Well, the AI is actually, ranking those based on probability, and blue is always going to come up as the highest. And so that's what's happening with AI. The model will choose blue because it has the highest probability, but that output in a regulatory, legal, statutory, from that standpoint, may not be correct, right? And if you ask that question two or three times, especially if you're asking the same question over again, it's gonna drift and shift because it doesn't understand why you're asking the same question again. So probabilistic inference means that the output comes from probability-driven decisions, not a strict rule-based decision. And so like why is that important? Well, as you know, we're looking for precision based on laws and regulations, right? And it needs to be consistent. We need literal interpretation, literal output of what the actual statute, CFR 19 regulation, or a ruling says. We can't be making things up based on probabilities. And a lot of the LLMs don't have that kind of guardrail and discipline to contain the output so that it's more precise. Okay. So moving on with that, we need a governance framework, right? And the governance framework needs to have oversight, risk-based oversight, just not too dissimilar from the way you may already have an internal audit program within your company. In addition to sort of that oversight, it needs deterministic sort of pathways that force the output into rigid, precise lanes. so that you're getting, not only consistent, but very precise output. And it's not just thinking, based on probabilities, what it thinks you want to hear or read or see. All right. And so it also actually needs good, regulatory content to pull those probabilities of the output from, where it's going to come up with the probability that it's blue, cloudy, falling, or green needs to be shaped, and there needs to be a guardrail on, sort of the knowledge base or the corpus of data that it's pulling information from when it's coming up with those probabilities in the first place. And you just don't get that kind of precision in the LLMs, that are free and that are available. You're just not going to get that. All right, so I'm going to move away from that sort of high level, theoretical overview, if you will, of LLMs and get more into the practical guardrails that we as trade compliance professionals need to operate within. All right, and so I just mentioned, having a precise body of content rather than the entire internet as a source of information. And so it's important, that a tool that you would be using as trade compliance professionals to do your job really has a tight corpus of knowledge that it's pulling from, not the internet. And so the tool needs to have access to the types of things that you see here on the slide, which you guys know about, right? It really needs to be focused on Title 19, the harmonized tariff schedule, customs bulletins, rulings, explanatory notes, um, uh, the section chapter notes, within the tariff schedules, informed compliance publications, court cases. These are all the things that you want your AI, if you're in trade compliance and you're looking for answers, to be really focused on. You don't want it going out to the internet to get that type of information. Moreover, it needs to be segmented in a way that it knows, the relevant period of time that the regulations pertain to, the effective dates. Is the tariff schedule that I'm looking for an answer for the correct one, or was there an update? Is it the right version? And this last year, 2025, there were more revisions and versions of the tariff schedule than we'd ever seen. So you can't just expect the right answer if the AI actually isn't aware that it needs to pull the right version of the tariff schedule or the regulations or what have you in order to get accurate responses. So these are all things, that a good tool that's designed for trade compliance professionals will get right and that you can audit. But in addition to those regulations, your company, may have its own policies, directives. It may have had meetings with the authorities, with customs. You may have had advice from your counsel that says, even though this ruling says X, Y, or Z, or if you classify a product based on the GRIs, this is the right answer. For this company, this is what we're going to be using because this is what the experts told us to do. So the AI needs to be able to have permission to, override the normal way you would normally go about determining regulatory answers, for those embedded internal company policies. So another practical thing to consider is, and I just said, you want to have a contained, body of knowledge that the AI is accessing. I would say that rule, can be loosened when it comes to finding out information about products, information that would be needed, like bill of material information or marketing information or in-use information or how to use it or how it was made. There's some really good information publicly available on the internet. And so, yeah, you can allow the AI to go out into the public domain and find information about the products that you're going to be working on, whether it's for free trade agreements or classification, export controls, what have you. Having said that, it would be even better, if you could tell the AI, well, you can go outside of your guardrail on the regs, and if you're going to go outside, we only are going to allow you to go to website A, B, or C. You can't go all over the internet. And so that is another capability that you really want to have, again, to limit and have those guardrails on the information that's coming in. Okay, so let's talk about other things that we can do to help improve the accuracy and confidence of the output, that you would be getting from an AI system. And what the approach that we're taking on this is a combination of things. It's not just one thing. It includes both a quantifiable requirement score from 0 to 100, as well as a confidence level, high, medium, and low. And the requirement score is a formula that we came up with that is based on whether or not the AI is making assumptions or has actually found, the exact information that is needed by the regulations in order to come out with an outcome. And that needs to be audited as well. And what you can do when you have something like that is you can have the ability to configure workflows within your system. This is not something that you can do again with general purpose models. You need workflow capabilities in order to do this. And based on that workflow, based on those rules, you can route, you can auto-complete, you can route to a supervisor or some other expert to get answers if there's information missing or if the confidence or the requirement scores are low. Here's just, a screenshot of examples of different confidence scores, based on a tariff classification. So it's important to be able to have like knobs and levers that are configurable to allow the AI to go down certain paths or trees instead of just letting it figure out what it wants to do on its own. And so if you have confidence after repetitive use of the output and review of the output results, you as a user will get confident. Well, if the tool says it's 90% confident and the risk level was not the risk level, but the output was medium or high, we're going to let that autocomplete. That's a setting. Another user and company may say, if it's 70%, we're confident that it's right enough for us, we're going to let it autocomplete. But if it doesn't fit your own individual threshold for risk, then you can have those route to a human who can go in and give it the review and complete the result. And if you go back to that ruling, that I showed earlier, there was a lot of discussion around human in the loop. So even if you're going to not have a human review every single classification, and you're going to allow your system or tool to autocomplete, you just have to know that you are still the one who needs to stand behind the autocomplete. You can't point the finger, to the AI in that case. All right. So another guardrail around having a compliant tool for AI has to involve auditing. All right. And just like without AI, we would do audits when I was at the Big Four. Companies had internal audit programs, whether it was quarterly or annually. That still needs to happen, guys. And what's a little bit different now, though, is that you can actually have, different AI agents that have been tuned to do different things, actually audit what the humans are doing and what the other AI agents are doing. All right. And so this will actually speed up the time it takes you to do audits. But we're not saying, that's good enough. No, you still need to have humans, that are still going to do reviews of not only your brokers and your team, but the AI results itself. And again, I would recommend that type of auditing to make sure that the AI models aren't drifting, should still happen on a quarterly or annual basis. So I guess in summary for this session, practical guardrails include things like making sure you have a corpus of regulatory data, informed compliance publications. If you're going to go to the internet to get information on products, you need guardrails on that to be able to tell the AI where it can and cannot go to get product information. You should have an ability to set different thresholds for confidence scores that determine what does or does not go to an auto approve. But you still need, the ability for the humans to do their thing, and just even you need to know that even if you're going to let it auto complete, you're still basically signing your name to the outcome. And there really should be a robust internal audit process in there as well. Um, Additional consideration, does the system itself produce an audit trail? Are there logs that show who did what, either from a human or a system or an AI agent standpoint? And it's important today, before more today than it was before that ruling 350722, to ensure that whoever is providing the instructions, the algorithms, the decisioning based on the ruling, that should be done by a licensed customs broker or a trade attorney. So that sort of ends up the guardrail section. What I thought we would do now, unless there are any questions on that we want to go through, is
I have, there's
yep,
one question, Todd, about the human in the loop workflows.
yep.
The question is, it makes sense if we have to do one HTS or one review at a time. But what if we are dealing with, 10 or 100 or 1,000 products? How do you, or what is your recommendation in that kind of a workflow to get the human in the loop?
Well, clearly we have a lot of customers that are doing, millions of classifications a year for multiple countries. And the type of workflow that we're seeing that works best is a workflow that does include an autocomplete, as I said, but only after you've done a fair amount of tuning and testing to be confident with the accuracy that you're getting on what goes to autocomplete. And what we're seeing is approximately 55 to 65% of the classifications are accurate out of the box. All right, just if you start on day one, start classifying, that's what you would expect to see with our system. Other systems, I've heard of all kinds of numbers out there. As the founder, CEO, and a licensed broker of this company, 55 to 65% out of the box. We can tune a knowledge base that would be specific to a particular company, or within that company, a particular class and kind of goods, and we can get that confidence and accuracy up into the 90 plus percentile. All right. But what that means, though, is that when you're doing in bulk thousands of these, there are still going to be classifications that go to a human queue because the AI wasn't confident enough, did not have enough information. And in that case, you're doing it the way hopefully you're doing it today. You're classifying that product just like you do today. Now, if you're using software that has at your fingertips all of the things that we have, like we have rulings, we have the section chapter notes, explanatory notes, etc., at your fingertips, we're seeing our clients are getting through those manual classifications about 30% faster. So overall, if you take the full bulk population that's in front of you, you're going to be 75% more accurate, not more accurate, sorry, 75% more efficient in terms of getting through those classifications. But inevitably, there will be classifications that a human is going to have to spend time on. And usually they're more like edge cases than anything else. Was that it? Okay.
No, that's it. Start. Actually, something just popped in. Maybe before you jump to the next section, I'll ask it. How about using AI for classifying units that contain intellectual property or part of platforms with confidential data where access is required?
Well, I think the question has to do with confidentiality of IP. And we do use an LLM in the background for purposes of generating the natural language, output that you see in our output. And so that information does need to be fed into the model. All of the LLMs, it's become industry standard practice. We're hosted on Azure, and we are using Microsoft Azure's enterprise OpenAI license. That's the backend LLM that we use, has a setting that says you can't store the information and you can't use the information to train the LLM. And so that information comes in and then it goes away. And then your data, the data that was fed into the model, if you're using our system, would be stored on our system as a single source of truth for the purposes of having the audit trails and the logs of who did what, as I was saying earlier. Doesn't have to be like, that your data can not even stay in our system. It can go back into your system, but that's how most of our clients are using it. So we haven't had a situation where a company did not feel comfortable using our platform to get classifications done because of IP risk, because we were able to show them that we have the proper controls in place to expose their data.
So just an extension to that question, Todd. It's not a user question, but more from, I want to open up the discussion a little bit. If it is not our platform, if someone is just looking at an LLM and if they have to worry about things like this, what would be your advice to them?
Well, if it's a general purpose LLM, you work for an enterprise, you would have to really make sure that the enterprise has set up access to that LLM to operate in the same way. In other words, Claude, OpenAI, Gemini, they all have enterprise settings that says we're not going to store or train our model based on your data. That needs to be set. If it's not, you are exposing, your company's intellectual property to the model. And actually, and it's easy to do because when you're in a browser, it's not always easy to know if you're hitting the LLM through your enterprise account, which has locks, versus your own personal account. All right. And so if by accident you're not on that enterprise, window into the LLM, then you're exposing your company's confidential data. But that can't happen if you're using an enterprise tool like ours. Like if you're loading your product data into our tool, that would never happen. Okay. All right. So what we have in the next few slides is an AI adoption considerations. Almost, it's a checklist essentially, and it's at the back of this deck. This is the last section, and it covers the 6 categories that you see here: outbound data, inbound data, structured output, the control architecture and monitoring, the source of the regulatory truth, and internal audits. All right. So it really does cover a lot of the information that we've been going over. And I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but on each of these, I am just going to kind of highlight, the one thing on each category that that kind of just resonated, with me. And so on the topic of data that's coming in, right? it's important to know, where that data comes from, and in the context of having an understanding of, based on the data that's coming in, it is going to create an output. All right. And so in order for the output to be reliable, you really have to be able to audit, upstream to, the source of the data that was fed in, all right, into the analysis. And so being able to explicitly identify where the information is coming from is important to the overall governance model. And then on the outbound side, you know, if you're not pleased with the output, if you look at the output, question the output, then you're probably going to have to, change the prompt and redo the output. And what we find is that, and you probably seen it in your own use of AI, is that you can actually spend more time, trying to recreate the output, to get it to the point that you want it to. And I actually think, and it could be that even the results from that earlier question about does it work? Is it useful? Could be this, right? On these LLMs, you might ask the same question, ask it differently, hope that you're going to get a better response. At the end of the day, if you had just classified it the old-fashioned way, you may have gotten there quicker. So, in terms of adopting AI in an enterprise setting, that's designed and tailored to work for the compliance professional, that'll be a failure if you're having to do that. And so, clearly, a well-designed system, one that you should consider adopting, you're not going to have to be spending time, redoing so that you can come up with a defensible answer. Um, okay, let's talk about structured output. What does that mean? So, like, again, if you're on a general purpose LLM, you're going to get, and you ask the same question multiple times, you're going to get different output. And it could even be formatted differently. There may be bold headers one time, there may be, numbers or indents, right? Bullets. It's going to be different. And that's not the right system to adopt for a compliance, function. And so the tools that I think are better in the way ours works is we literally force the output into a structure so it's consistent each time. All right. And this actually came up in a what we're onboarding a client, and the client was giving information about the product and was telling K or AI that in this particular case, you have to classify the set as two different items, not the set as a whole based on the essential character. And we don't have that tooling just yet to allow that to happen. All right. Our system is going to provide one tariff code for the set. It's not quite there. We call that an edge case, which we can configure for the client if we knew that that was something that they needed, right? But going in, that gate wasn't open. And the client kept trying to tell Kay, you have to do it this way. You have to do it this way. And it wouldn't come out that way. And I told the client it's supposed to work that way. We don't have an open-ended go to Claude and get what you want. It's repeatable. It's that way by design. So it'll be precise, and it'll be auditable, and it'll be efficient and effective for you. So it's just interesting that came up yesterday. And that's what I mean by deterministic rules and structured output. Okay.
There is a question here, Anand, if you want to.
I was going to answer that online, Leslie. So, Todd, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Keep going. All right. So just, yeah, two more slides, and then we can, end it up with some additional questions. And this has to do with the control the control architecture and the monitoring. And why this matters is because if you can't reconstruct how you got there, all right, then it's going to be not as defensible if you're in an audit a year or two from now. All right. So it's important that you're able to take a snapshot of exactly the state of things when you got your output and when you completed your finding. From a product standpoint, we refer to it as a product genome. You need to be able to take a snapshot of everything that was exposed to the AI at that point in time as it existed at that point in time, including the version of the regulations at that time, right? In order to have a really defensible outcome. Moreover, in order to be able to audit, if you're auditing and you don't have that information, how can you audit the outcome? And then this just finally gets into, again, kind of what I just said, but it has to do with the regulatory source of truth. Changes are happening every day. Every time there's a truth, there's a tweet, there's a new Chapter 99, there's a new something. The system has to know, based on the date of entry, this is what existed from a regulatory standpoint at that point in time, not today. So having the audit trail, the temporal traceability, which is what happened by whom, when, and being able to go back and reconstruct is important and should be part of the overall adoption checklist. All right, so that, I guess, concludes the discussion on the guardrails. From a slide presentation, I want to thank all of you for hanging with me through that. And if there are any questions or any follow-ups, we can certainly address those now.
I don't see any open question start, but I'm going to throw one for the benefit of the audience here. Look, you're talking about a framework. You're talking about practical guardrails. And most of the people that are on the call work for large enterprises.
Yep.
What is trade compliance's role in this versus is this all an IT a role and we just falling back on IT, or do you see trade compliance playing an active part in making all this happen?
I think it's critically important to have the subject matter experts at the table with IT when selecting a solution like this. What we're hearing from a lot of our potential customers, that are subject matter experts, licensed customs brokers, lawyers, consultants, export control officers, is they can see our system and they know that we know what we're doing. All right. But what they're battling internally is the company, has an initiative to use AI, but they're wanting, their employees to use the general purpose LLMs, and they almost have to prove that the general purpose LLMs aren't good enough before they're allowed to look at a purpose-built system like ours. So that's just kind of what we're seeing. IT has a mandate to use AI. They want, the employees of the organization, the subject matter experts of the organization in the different areas, payables, payroll, HR, everywhere, using AI. But it's not until they can show that the general purpose AI isn't working for them that they then start to be able to really consider a tool like ours.
Perfect. And let's say I have convinced that we need a solution like this. If I'm a trade practitioner and I've sold it to my company, what are some of the other things that I need to look at in bringing a solution and not use an LLM, or in taking this to the next step where what are some of the other practical aspects that I need to be focused on in getting a solution implemented?
Well, I mean, beyond the guardrails around using AI, within any system or tool, I think the workflow that we spoke about, where you have a human in the loop that can route to a supplier or an engineer or the supervisor for approval is critical. I think the logging of who did what, when, and where is critical. The ability to have a snapshot, immutable record that can be reproduced for audit purposes, you got to have that. And then, of course, the ability to, have API integrations into upstream and downstream enterprise systems, whether it's SAP, GTS, order management, material management, ERPs, like Team Center or PTC Windchill or Bamboo, Rose, or even API integrations into existing global trade management platforms in addition to GTS like E2Open or Thomson Reuters that don't have the native AI capabilities. I think all of that, makes for a Generation 2 AI native GTM that's important today.
So you talked about creating an immutable audit trail or an audit record. And from a classification perspective, what would that look like, Todd? Meaning, if I'm a user of the platform, what am I looking at in an immutable audit?
Well, it takes a snapshot of the data that you had on hand about the product that you're classifying. So was it a picture? Was it a tech pack? Was it a bill of materials? Was it a user guide? Material safety data sheet? Like all of that information. In our world, we munge it together. It's a technical term I like to use, and then we take a snapshot at the time that the classification is taking place, who did what the AI came up with, the assumptions that it made, or the facts that it found, and then the indent by indent analysis following the GRIs. What section, chapter, WCO explanatory notes, rulings were used as the basis for coming up with the classification, who approved it. That all becomes an immutable record. And we can produce a beautiful report that you can hand to anybody when they say, how did you come up with a classification? Whether it's somebody internally, it's a customer, or it's an auditor.
Perfect. Those were the questions. I don't see any other questions at this point. Leslie, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you've covered it. The only comment I might make is that on the topic of who owns the AI and trade compliance project, I had a conversation or a meeting on this topic yesterday and encouraged the trade compliance professionals to take ownership, even if they're collaborating, cross-functionally, because nobody's going to know what you need except you. And the best case scenario is you take ownership, but you get the budget from IT, right? So the money is often out there, but you still need to be the ones to take charge of what the decision is around your trade compliance tools. And being at a webinar like this is a good step in that direction. Hopefully you got some content and some benefit from the conversation about guardrails. We're happy to, of course, continue the conversation offline. And there's a lot more that can be said about the guardrails conversation. And it gets sort of audited by your IT security team when they come and ask us when you're onboarding with us or before you're even onboarding with us to see if we're even qualified to be part of your tech stack at your company. So we expect that kind of review and that kind of scrutiny, if you will, that gets us into some of the biggest companies in the world. With that, I want to say thanks to Todd and Anand, and thank everybody for joining. Great questions. Thanks for anyone who participated in our polls. We didn't have any extra questions that came in, but if you think of anything afterwards, you've got our email addresses. You know where to find us. We will send the recording out to everybody who registered. And if there's any other references that you heard us reference or mention, let us know. We're happy to send links along to you. Hopefully you're walking away with a few practical ideas. We'll continue doing webinars throughout the year. We've tried to increase our cadence because there's a lot of demand for this content. Hope you got something valuable today. Go out, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.